This is one of the creatures from the SEO Selfish Society. Its appearance is a little different from the animals that the boy had encountered in the village. SDO, curious, intently observed the red panda's paws, with their striking red color and sharp claws. Then, his gaze shifted to its adorable fluffy tail. Suddenly, other animals appeared out of nowhere. First a rabbit, then a monkey, a bear, and a horse, all gathered behind the red panda. It joyfully spread its arms wide, as if to welcome him. "Welcome to our family." SDO looked around in surprise at the animals surrounding him. He bowed slightly towards the red panda and curiously asked, "Aren't you afraid of humans?" The red panda's face beamed as it quickly replied to the boy, "Not at all. Everyone in the XNAS society is very friendly." The red panda excitedly talked about the selfish society and the things that made them no longer fear humans. "They feed us, teach us, and even diligently cleaned up after us." Even the horse seemed to enjoy hearing this, letting out an excited neigh. The little red panda continued his story. "They played with us every day, took us everywhere, so we have a lot of affection for humans." The clear blue sky gradually transformed into the mystical black of night. The scene shifted to the fluffy white monkey's comfortable bed. Nizu cheerfully praised the animals he had just met. They were really adorable. SDO agreed with Nizu. Well, they're as cute as the fuzz on my roots." He turned over, wanting to confirm his opinion with SDO. "Right? The raccoon, the red panda from earlier was especially cute." Nizu had accidentally misidentified SDO's species, calling him a raccoon instead of a red panda. So he quickly corrected himself to red panda. Nizu leaned down from his bed, excitedly saying to SDO, "I want to see them again." His friend quickly nodded in agreement. "We can go tomorrow if you'd like." Nizu turned, heading back towards his plush bed. His face glowed with delight and excitement. "It's all right. Kai said she'd bring the mission tomorrow." Styo stared intently at his upturned palm, as if in response to Nizu. "Right." Then he abruptly clenched his hand into a tight fist. "Tell that monkey. Once we get the mission, we'll be away from headquarters for a while. So get some good rest, and we better say our goodbyes before we leave." The inky blackness of night slowly faded, giving way to the first golden rays of dawn. SDO gently pushed open the window, welcoming the warm sunlight. Small sparrows chirped merrily, as if chatting with him. "Good morning." SDO smiled, also hearing their warning of an approaching rain. They chirped reminders of a coming shower and, "Be careful not to get wet." SDO was a little surprised by the thoughtful reminder, but he politely replied, "Thank you." Nizu had also woken up and was walking towards SDO. "You're awake?" Hearing the call, SDO turned around. Nizu's face was unusually bright. He gave a bright smile and said, "What a wonderful morning." Curious, SDO thought to himself, "Where did you learn that phrase? Which AI taught you that?" Nizu's eyes lit up. He excitedly invited SDO. "Let's have breakfast, and then go greet the friends we met yesterday." SDO happily agreed, walking towards Nizu. In the sky, dark, ominous clouds began to gather, slowly covering the clear blue sky. A cold wind rustled through the leaves. SDO and Nizu were leisurely strolling along the tree-lined path. SDO strode ahead, while a still sleepy Nizu followed behind. Suddenly, a bright voice called out from behind. "SDO, it's Lena." His face lit up with a bright smile as he saw SDO. He greeted him warmly. "Fancy meeting you here. It's good to see you again." Lena didn't forget to greet Nizu as well. "Hello to you too, White Fox." In contrast to Lena's enthusiasm, SDO seemed rather indifferent, only replying with a curt greeting. Confused and unsure what was going on, Lena quickly asked, "Why do you look so down? Did something happen?" SDO quickly averted his gaze. He replied in a monotonous, lifeless tone, "No, good morning." Lena laughed brightly and slung an arm around SDO's shoulder, asking, "What are you doing here?" "I'm getting ready for training." He pointed towards a path leading into the dense forest and continued, "If you follow this path, you'll find the training grounds." He then began to relay what he knew to SDO. "Actually, I heard a rumor that an incredibly powerful warrior returned today. I heard they mainly use a spear, but are also proficient with many other weapons." As soon as he finished speaking, images of those weapons flashed through both their minds. Besides the sharp spear, there were swords, bows and arrows, and even a powerful flail. The image of a majestic warrior wielding a long spear also appeared vividly. Lena chimed in, "Anyway, this person, with their superior combat skills and terrifying destructive power, is also known as the Bao Saint." Their fingers are as sharp as the talons of a bird of prey. They say they are the talons of Ignis. SDO. After listening to the information Lena shared, SDO replied, I understand. The three of them continued walking and chatting. Lena seemed doubtful, suggesting that Ignis was the mythical bird from the legends of Sao. If that warrior was known as Ignis's Claw, then surely he must also be a legend. SDO turned to Lena curiously and asked, Why are you so eager to meet him? He let out a hearty laugh. I just want to see if there's anything I can learn from him. He's called the Claw, so I'll become the beak. You weren't overly enthusiastic, nor were you indifferent. You simply said you'd support me. Lena's face suddenly flushed, a bright joy illuminating her features. He coughed slightly, embarrassed, and replied, Thank you. Suddenly, he stopped walking. Lena scratched her head in confusion. Well then, I'll go this way. Lena suddenly sensed something strange. Turning back to SDO, wait. A strong gust of wind suddenly erupted from a forest. A gentle breeze swept the fallen leaves across the ground. The rustling sound echoed through the air. Lena frowned slightly, a worried look on her face, and turned to the commander. Sir, I don't think we should take this path today. I smell the strong stench of blood at the end of the road. Nizu, with a troubled expression, replied, That's not human blood. Lena, don't be afraid. I think it's the blood of the wild beasts we encountered yesterday. They may have been hunted. Stio also seemed to sense an unusual presence around them. He asked, Is something approaching us? Lena immediately took a fighting stance. One hand gripped her sword tightly, the other shielding Stio protectively. The pungent smell of blood grew stronger. Suddenly, a pair of legs slowly emerged from the shadows. A girl with bruised arms appeared. She carried a heavy long sword on her back. Her name was Bilong. Bilong's eyes were downcast, as if veiled in a dark, mysterious fog. His calm gaze suddenly sharpened, turning cold and piercing. Lena watched as the girl approached, his hand still gripping the hilt of his sword. Slowly, he drew his sword from its sheath. He spoke first, breaking the tense silence that had fallen, starting the day with the pungent stench of blood. A monster had appeared at headquarters shortly after. He wondered aloud, asking Burong, Were you two so hungry you had to butcher them yourselves? She curiously asked in return. Butcher them? The words butcher them had barely left his lips when she suddenly remembered something. Her lips parted slightly. She pointed ahead, saying, There's another one here. She resolutely pointed at Nizu, who was awkwardly cowering in a corner. Another filthy one? Nizu retorted. He didn't understand why he was being targeted for doing nothing. A blade of light suddenly materialized in her hand, her face filled with contempt. You're not worthy of being called human, just a filthy, disgusting creature. With those words, she lunged towards Nizu, dual blades flashing. In a moment of sheer panic, Nizu threw his arms up defensively. Nizu's sudden movement caused the Ahuru cactus on his head to tumble to the ground. The white-furred monkey trembled, clutching his chest and asking, What did you mean by swinging your swords around like that? Byra gasped in astonishment. You can talk? She reassessed the white-furred monkey before her. What's going on? You're not a monster? A human? Just a furry monkey? Her grip on her blades began to tremble slightly. Nizu squeezed his eyes shut in fear. She muttered like a madwoman. It'll be troublesome if you're human. Tell me, you're not. Say you're not human. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on her glowing blade. SDO's voice rang out. Human? You're not human? She questioned. SDO's hand gripped her tightly, so strongly that Byron couldn't move. Even a single step forward was impossible. Byron looked up in astonishment, her mind filled with doubt. Since when did he? SDO suddenly countered, interrupting her thoughts. Does it matter? He flicked his wrist, and Byron's short, glowing blade instantly vanished. It dissipated into the air as if it had never existed. SDO looked directly at her and softly said her name, John Byron. Byron was still in shock. How did he know her name? She pulled back her hand and cautiously spoke. You're the new psychic ability user. SDO, aren't you? Why are you stopping me? SDO stood protectively in front of the white-furred monkey. Nizu also spoke up, asking Byron, Why do you want to hurt him? She replied indifferently. Monsters are nothing but vile pests that need to be exterminated. SDO tried to explain to Burong that Niju wasn't a monster. Burong stubbornly retorted, insisting it wasn't human either. The two couldn't find common ground. The argument reached an impasse. Finally, they fell silent, glaring at each other. The quiet lasted for a moment, Then Burong looked at the innocent-faced, white-furred monkey before her and made an accusation. That monster could use its razor-sharp teeth and sharp claws to rip you to shreds. Anytime it wanted, she continued to defend her point. Unlike with humans, we can't communicate. With these inferior creatures, Burong strode forward and asserted firmly, if we can't talk to them. She brushed past Niju and Estio and concluded, then we can never trust them. Never. Estio calmly questioned, is that why you killed them? Byron hesitated for a moment, not turning around to answer. The guild leader ordered me, forbidding me from harming others arbitrarily. She glanced behind her, then continued, meaning, if they aren't human, it doesn't matter. Just then, Kai appeared, correcting her. That's not what I meant. Byron turned around joyfully at the sound of Kai's voice. Kai stepped forward, sternly saying, I asked you not to needlessly take the life of any creature unnecessarily. Byron realized Kai had no intention of making excuses for her. She sadly replied, no one died. Kai sighed, his expression displeased. That includes the creatures being kept in the guild. She added in explanation. They are an integral part of the guild, as well as trusted associates. Burong suddenly showed her annoyance, shouting out loud. From the very beginning, treating those things as close allies was a grave mistake. She turned her back on everyone, angrily spitting out a petulant remark. I won't participate in this foolish mission. Kai sadly looked at Burong and sighed. You need to be more careful with your words. Burong turned away, silently refusing to answer. Kai, watching her back, said, I will demand compensation for this incident. So, return to your position. I expect you won't cause any further harm to the guild during your stay here. Hearing these words, she gritted her teeth, seemingly unable to accept this humiliation. Finally, before actually leaving, she spat out a frustrated fine. Estio and Niju watched as the figure disappeared. Both wore expressions of displeasure. After Burong left, everyone stood in stunned silence, gazing at the desolate battlefield she left behind. Trees were uprooted and toppled, scattered everywhere. The once pristine lake now stained a gruesome crimson with blood. Countless animal carcasses lay strewn across the once vibrant green grass. Lena gasped in horror. How could this happen? He desperately searched, hoping to find even one small creature that had miraculously survived the carnage. I don't see anything alive. Sayo was overcome with grief, his eyes filled with sorrow for the gentle creatures, the innocent lives that were now lost forever. He silently walked onto the blood-soaked grass, towards the lifeless bodies lying still. Kai spoke, his voice heavy. I am sorry, the young girl explained with a remorseful expression. Burong isn't a bad kid. It's just, but whenever she sees monsters, or any wild animals, Kai hesitated, clearing her throat. Their first encounter was a complete disaster. Estio spoke in a low, sorrowful voice. Creatures who deserved an apology. He clenched his fist, instead suffered unjust deaths simply for being different from humans. The memory of their words echoed in his mind. These animals once said they loved humans. Estio lowered his head, concealing his welling emotions. If a being with unparalleled power appeared and slaughtered humans without a second thought, he abruptly turned, his eyes cold. After witnessing all these innocent victims, would humans simply call it another unfortunate incident? Kai gave a bitter smile. She thought to herself, it truly was a tragedy she was trying to salvage. They'll never change until they experience the same thing themselves. Estio silently knelt beside the animals' bodies. He sorrowfully cradled the weasel's body in his arms. Then, he turned and walked towards an empty patch of land. The air grew heavy as Kai silently watched Estio's every step. The boy knelt beside the empty patch of earth, gently placing the weasel's body to one side. Then, he began to dig with his bare hands. As he diligently dug, Estio suddenly felt a warm hand on his shoulder. It was Lena. She smiled softly and said, let's do this together. Nizu also approached, saying, I'll lend a hand too. On the simple earthen mound, a few pristine white flowers were placed as a farewell to their newfound friend. Estio's hands were covered in dirt, but he didn't mind. Two humans and a snow-white monkey stood silently, looking at the mounds of earth they had just built, the final resting place for their unfortunate animal friends who had lost their lives to Bylon's cruelty. No one knew what the others were thinking. Only the rustling of the wind through the leaves could be heard. May these small creatures rest peacefully in the shade of the cool green trees. After everything was done, the group entered the town. The sky was a brilliant blue that day, carrying the promise of a peaceful, carefree day. In front of a bustling cafe, people hurried past in a constant stream. Inside, Kai and Estio sat facing each other, ready to discuss business. Seeing Nizu chain up outside, Estio reassured him, "It's a little cramped inside. I'll be out as soon as we're done." He then turned back and carefully read the mission details on the paper. Exclusive mission from the Xenophon Guild leader. Client, Marissa S., Ruberaizen Aconia. Location, Eli's Sio capital. Estio's eyes widened in surprise, thinking to himself, Ruberaizen. Across from him, Kai took a sip of coffee and began to explain the mission details. Princess Marissa is the eldest princess of the Ruberaizen Empire and the beloved daughter of the emperor, cherished and adored by all. This mysterious princess seems to be quite the daring individual. According to Kai, Estio learned that she would be turning 21 this year. She's a strong, independent princess who has refused all proposals. She said that if it were her, she would probably make a completely unreasonable request. Kai smiled, turning to Estio and asking, "Would you be willing to accept?" Estio calmly countered with a question. "Do I have the right to refuse a request from the royal family?" Kai beamed. "This announcement has a prerequisite before you carry out the mission." She excitedly revealed the condition. "Bring a warrior to that location with you." Okay, pointed. This mission was originally assigned to Buren. She glanced at the coffee in front of Estio and changed her tone. "However, since the situation has changed," and she smiled gently, pointing at herself, "naturally, I will accompany you, but I shouldn't be considered a combat member." With that said, Kai pushed a few files towards Estio. "I'll give you the right to choose your own combat partner. Choose carefully from this list." Stio put down the mission paper, his gaze falling on the 3 profiles in front of him. He meticulously reviewed each person's information. The first one possesses lightning magic. While reading, Stio asked aloud, "Is there a specific reason for requiring a combat member for this mission?" "As far as I know, the capital city of Eli is incredibly peaceful." Kai paused for a moment at his words, then explained. "However, according to guild regulations, mission teams must include both support and combat members." Kai stroked his chin and continued, "Because you're one of the guild leaders, you're not permitted to leave without a protector." After hearing the explanation, Stio understood the situation somewhat, but he still had some concerns. "Do I need to be protected more thoroughly than usual?" Kai looked at Stio's serious expression and replied, "Of course, it's not easy to counter your abilities." Her gaze also fell upon Neo. Bound tightly to a giant cactus by a chain around his neck, tears streaming down his face. Outside the window, "I admit that your comrades, Neo, all possess extraordinary power, but ultimately, Kai is still worried about Stio. If you have to face an enemy on par with Bilong, can you emerge victorious without a scratch?" Stio remained silent, carefully reading the information of the combat members without saying a word. Finally, he closed the file, seemingly unwilling to choose any of those who had just been introduced. He then asked, "Does the combat member have to be someone from the guild?" Kai replied, "No, if you can recruit someone from outside the guild, feel free." Stio lowered his gaze in thought for a moment. Then he pushed the file back towards Kai and made his decision. "Well then, let's pick a good day." A pained groan echoed through the dense forest, shattering the tranquility of nature. Parker stumbled out of the teleportation gate, immediately staggering and grabbing onto a tree trunk for support. He vomited uncontrollably. Estio had to step behind him, gently rubbing his back to soothe his nausea. Parker's face was ashen, as pale as his own hair. He covered his mouth with a hand and weakly said, "I'm sorry, Commander." Just then, Kai also emerged from the teleportation gate. Parker continued to dry heave, as if trying to empty his stomach, then felt ashamed by his unseemly display. The teleportation gate itself isn't the problem, but sometimes I experience some side effects. Worried about Parker's condition, Estio turned to Kai and asked, "Isn't there a gate that can teleport directly from headquarters to the capital?" Kai explained, "The Emperor is a very cautious man. The royal family always has many enemies lurking in the shadows. Enemies are always lurking around the royal family." Thinking of the Emperor she had never met, she offered this as proof of his caution. Even Mabian and Haiga, his maternal relatives, were deployed to the front lines and never returned. From Kai's words, it's not difficult to deduce her conclusion. That's why he doesn't want a gathering of individuals with special abilities, people who could easily infiltrate the capital. Finally, Kai offered a small smile, gesturing down the path ahead. Therefore, even though we're exhausted from this moment on, we'll have to travel on foot. A gentle breeze rustled through the lush green leaves, causing the branches to sway gently in the wind. The group walked in silence for a long time, finally arriving at a place called Ranger Village. The villagers seemed delighted and excited, joyfully welcoming the travelers from afar. Seeing the group inquiring with the villagers, someone suddenly exclaimed, "I can't believe it. There's even an angel here." The village children hid behind piles of firewood, curiously asking each other, "Where do they come from?" "I heard they're from the XNIS Guild." The boy in the middle suddenly turned and asked, "Hey, those people who came here last midnight, were they from a guild too?" The boy on the left quickly replied, "No, they were from the Ballista Guild." The remaining boy curiously asked, "So, which guild is stronger?" The two boys beside him immediately shouted, "Of course it's Ignis, you dummy. Ignis is the strongest guild in our country." On the other side, Nizu heard the noise and looked towards the woodpile, but the children quickly ducked down. Curious and puzzled, Nizu crouched down. The black-haired boy in the middle declared confidently, "XNIS is the biggest and most powerful guild of all." The other boy chimed in, "Even His Majesty, the Emperor, supports them." The boy with the buzz cut, although not knowing much about the guilds, now had to chime in with praise. "Amazing. Footsteps are approaching. Could it be?" A boy with vibrant red hair appears. "I wonder if these people would be willing to help us." The boy exclaims, his eyes filled with hope. "I heard this guild takes on all sorts of requests." The boy with the buzz cut from earlier speaks up, "Hey, Rion, I heard it costs money. If you want to ask them to take on a request. For us, that is." The black-haired boy chimes in agreement. "That's right, Rion." Rion clenches his fists and says with determination, "I have money." The other boys jump up, quickly coming to a decision. "Then let's just go ask." The black-haired boy exclaims excitedly. "All right." He grabs Rion's hand. "Let's go, Rion." The red-haired boy, Rion, hesitates, glancing back for a moment, then cries out, "Father." Parker's voice echoes through the house, filled with regret. "I'm truly sorry." Stio consoles Parker sympathetically. "It's okay. Rest until the aftereffects subside." He tries to express his remorse, but he can't help but dry heave, whispering, "I'm sorry." Kai entered the room and immediately took in the scene before him. "Oh my God, this is awful. Is he all right?" She gently adjusted Parker's blanket and replied, "He's okay." Stio stood up, pleading earnestly, "Please take care of Parker for me. I'm going out for a bit. You understand what I mean, right?" Stio said with a meaningful tone. "I know you must have a good reason to leave like this," Kai responded. Even so, Kai reminded Stio, "But right now, you don't have any teammates in your group yet. So, please be careful," Kai said with concern. Nizu spoke up confidently. "Don't worry too much. Nizu will go with him." The mischievous monkey waved goodbye. "See you later." They walked out together and closed the door, leaving it slightly ajar. She anxiously watched as the two figures disappeared into the distance. Afterwards, Kai went back inside, where Parker was now sound asleep. She touched the door and suddenly thought of someone. Mabi and R2G Kyle stood pensively before a window, lost in thought. Only SDO has the authority to bestow the title of Duke and become his guardian. While bowing and observing SDO and Nizu, he respectfully said, "I hope you will arrive soon, Duke Agnika." At the same time, Suki, perched on a high branch, suddenly cried out. The black cat instantly realized someone was following them. SDO looked up and replied, "I know." Immediately after, Suki jumped down from the tree. The cat landed on his shoulder, reporting with a suspicious tone, "It's not those brats." Suki's face showed clear disgust. "It's those bastards staying at the same inn as that idiot, Avian. That foolish Avian. They've been tailing you since you entered here." However, SDO calmly replied, "I know." From SDO's shoulder, Suki jumped down, observed him, and remarked, "You become more perceptive." The cat explained, "We just sense them naturally, like breathing." While glancing at the suspicious figures behind him, Seogyo recounted the stream of thoughts that naturally flowed through his mind, even when we don't intentionally focus on them. The cat wagged its tail, praising, "Good, very good, but you need to practice more." Like a strict teacher, Suki continued to instruct. You must always be vigilant, even in the presence of humans or animals, because they can all become cunning and unpredictable. The boy obediently replied, "Yes, I will try my best." Suddenly, a contemptuous voice rang out. "What are you muttering to yourself?" It was a lowly soldier, patrolling with his comrades. "Do you have the ability to talk to cats or something like that?" The soldier's words left Seogyo speechless and made Suki wonder. That idiot doesn't seem to know the young master's true identity, does he? One of the thugs sneered, pointing at SDO. "That guy doesn't have any weapons, so I think he's not a physical ability user." "Exactly," another one chimed in. "Maybe he left his weapon back at the inn." The leader burst out laughing, his voice dripping with mockery. "To make such a rookie mistake? What a total newbie." SDO looked confused and asked, "Who are you?" As if he'd stepped on their tails, they roared furiously. "We are Ballista." He gritted his teeth, his voice full of rage. "This brat dares to mock us, even after seeing our guild's insignia, right?" With that, the leader jabbed a finger at the emblem on his chest. After careful observation, SDO finally exclaimed, "Ah, so that's your guild's emblem." The thug puffed out his chest and continued, "Now you see, let's see how long you can gloat." Nizu approached, suddenly emitting a strange, incomprehensible sound. The soldier, standing before him, trembled with fear. You've tamed a ferocious beast," he stammered. "A monster, or something terrifying," he muttered. Seo calmly spoke up, gently explaining, "Nizu isn't a monster. He appeared friendly on the surface, but inwardly, he was slandering them." An arrogant expression was clear on his face. Smugness radiated from him, as if empowered by the giant beast beside him. "Hey man, don't get carried away," another soldier warned. The first soldier tried to lower his voice, speaking conciliatorily. We just want to understand you a little better. Since we're all in the same line of work, right?" he said tentatively. He thought to himself, filled with suspicion. Does their guild have some kind of grudge against Znai's? Seeing Seo's silence, they started to get restless, their lips pressed tightly together. A soldier, unable to contain his anger, spoke up accusingly. "Why aren't you answering?" He roared furiously. "You mean you don't want to talk to a powerful guild like ours? Just small fry like us? You little punk." Another one, equally enraged, growled. "You talked to that stray cat, but treated us like we were nothing?" The boy silently observed their fury, his face completely clueless. The ballistic gang members continued their ranting, leaving Niju even more helpless. Meanwhile, Seogyo approached Niju. He said to Niju, "I don't have much time, so get to the point." Still hesitant, their leader spoke up. "Seems like you're just a low-ranking soldier, sent to protect a kid without any backup." His words stunned both Seogyo and Suki. "A kid? Wait a minute." Suki immediately realized the terrible misunderstanding. Another thug chimed in, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "When did you start working here?" The humble young man replied, "I just joined the guild at the beginning of this year, sir." After hearing Sushio's answer, they immediately regained their confidence. "See? I told you." The thug threw a punch with a scornful laugh. "He's just a rookie." The leader, seemingly with all his might, threw a powerful punch at the young man. In the blink of an eye, Nuju's hand swiftly blocked the attack. His attack. SDO's expression darkened as the small monkey growled angrily. The thug trembled in astonishment at the scene that just unfolded. Shocked and frightened, he glanced at SDO. The leader, though afraid, didn't forget to hurl insults. "You bastard!" Didn't even flinch. Suddenly, a shout of warning rang out. "Captain, look out above." It was Suki, who had transformed into a ferocious tiger. They surged forward with ferocious intensity, poised to unleash a savage attack. Suddenly, Suki, in the form of a ferocious tiger, pounced, sending the ballista soldiers into a state of sheer terror. Suki growled ferociously, without pause. One of the men screamed in agony as Suki's sharp claws raked across him, blood spraying everywhere. Fortunately, SDO intervened just in time before things got any worse. "Suki, stop it," he said softly. "You can't just attack people like that." SDO slowly approached, while the other two men scrambled back in fear. "They didn't mean us any harm, did they?" Josh Mark, the Special Forces captain. Upon having his identity revealed, Josh Mark jumped up in terror, thinking to himself, "Damn it, does he know everything about us?" His companions were sweating bullets, but tried to act tough. "You dare attack the leader?" Rian and the other children, who were watching from the trees, suddenly yelled, "Stop! Fighting is forbidden in the ranger village." the young boy warned sternly, his voice laced with a threat. "We will report this if you cause any more trouble." Just as he was helped up, he retorted loudly, "Brat, you're talking too much. We're the victims here. We were attacked." They helped each other up, limping away. "That kid better quit his guild as soon as possible." However, Joshmark turned back, calling out a warning. "The guild master of Ignis isn't normal. He's a monster. They didn't form a guild to recruit humans." Sayo remained calm, questioning, "Do you have any proof to prove that their guild master is an enemy of mankind?" He replied, "The divine Sahanan told me in a dream." He frowned, repeating, "The golden dragon, Sahanan?" Joshmark, with great difficulty, tried to explain. "It seems like you don't know. Recently, rumors have spread from the distant east about a new pope being appointed. Those in the know were already aware of this." Estio thought to himself, he definitely wasn't lying. He continued speaking, his tone unfriendly. "Even though he hasn't officially set foot in the Holy Land, I assume that weak emperor will cling to Ennis. For how much longer?" Joe Smart stared intently at Estio, then offered some advice. "I hope you'll think this through carefully before making a decision." "Young man." Estio watched pensively as Joe Smart's figure disappeared. His close friends rushed over, worriedly asking, "Are you all right?" Estio turned around, smiling as he replied, "I'm fine. Thanks for stopping them." The children surrounding him, their eyes filled with admiration and curiosity, asked, Are you taming a tiger?" The boy quickly corrected himself. "Suki is my companion." The children petted Suki's head, exclaiming in awe, "Wow, that's amazing. He's friends with a tiger." It's amusing when naive children ask such questions. "But why did you just stand there? You're from Ignis, a powerful kingdom." "Yeah, you should teach them a lesson." Stio looked pensive at the children's words. "Didn't you say fighting was forbidden in this village?" Rihan stepped forward, replying with a matter-of-fact expression. "That's true, but they provoked him first. So there's nothing wrong with punishing them." The boy suddenly hesitated, clutching Stio's hand. Rihan's hesitation made Stio curious. The boy timidly asked, "Can children like us also make requests?" Stio replied gently, as if it were obvious. "Of course, there's no age limit on making a wish." Rihan beamed, a bright smile spreading across his face. "That's a relief. I heard Ballista doesn't accept requests from minors, so I thought maybe Ignis would." Stio bowed low, respectfully addressing the boy. "However, I'm currently undertaking a different mission." Not wanting to disappoint the child, he offered a suggestion. "If you want to submit a request to the guild, you need to visit the nearest guild branch." Another boy sadly refused. "I can't do that. Residents of Avengers villas aren't allowed to leave the forest." Stio, strictly adhering to regulations, explained while Rin's face fell. "There are procedures for submitting requests to the guild, and if you don't follow them correctly, we can't accept your request." The children erupted in complaints, calling him heartless. Suki, silently enduring the children's clinging, understood that. If he were truly cold, he wouldn't be patiently explaining things to them. The brown-haired boy is really trying. Can't you at least listen? Rin's father is in the capital. The boy trailed off. Rin interrupted, his voice firm. "No need. Enough. There's no need to discuss procedures or anything like that," the boy said, his voice filled with despair. "You mean you won't even give people like us a chance? Those of us with no way out of this forest?" Rin's friend tried to calm him. "Rin, calm down. If we just ask politely." But Rin wasn't listening. "Enough," he shouted, his voice full of rage and frustration. "I don't need help from a group like this." Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind erupted, pushing him backward. He was swept into a hazy, gray space. It turned out that Stio had pulled Rin back into Rian's painful memories. A father and son were playing happily in the forest, when the father suddenly noticed something strange. He turned around and saw a group of soldiers approaching them with stern faces. Their appearance filled the father and son with curiosity and worry. Suddenly, a brutish soldier grabbed Rian's father roughly by the arm and yanked him away. They dragged him off, preventing young Rian from following. Tears welled in Rian's eyes as he reached out, desperately calling after him. "Father!" That cry was his last memory of his beloved father. Then, Estio jolted awake, back to reality. For a moment, he was disoriented. Children were cheering, chasing after Rian's shadow. Their calls caught Rian's attention. The children ran after Rian. "Wait!" they called out, although he tried to appear calm. Estio watched the children, lost in thought. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion. The sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple as they returned to the small house. He walked slowly into the room, calling for Kai. As if anticipating something, Kai spoke. "It seems you have much to say, don't you?" SDO, a hint of sadness in his voice, asked Kai. "The wicked society, was it born to harm humanity?" SDO's question caught Kai off guard. "That's a profound question, one I can't easily answer." SDO persisted. "Please answer me." After a moment of contemplative silence, Kai solemnly replied, "This guild has no intention of harming any AI." He firmly affirmed, "Understood." She froze, a skeptical look on her face. "Is that all?" SDO resolutely stated, "I've heard everything I needed to hear, but there's still something I'm not sure about. Between Sahanian and Kai, one of you is lying," he declared emphatically. "I can tell if you're telling the truth." SDO continued his deduction, an image of Sahanian flashing in his mind. "I just want to hear her say it herself. Which means the one deceiving me is Kim Ryong Sahanian." The owner of the unconsciously clenching hand spoke up. "I'm sorry. There's something I haven't told you." Kai, sitting beside the bed, confessed honestly, "I didn't mean to deceive you, but I ended up using you without being upfront." She cautiously revealed what she knew. A long time ago, in the beginning, when the guild was first founded, individuals with extraordinary abilities like us were hunted and brutally oppressed. For that very reason, this guild was born with a burning desire to create a sanctuary for those with special powers where they could live freely with their heads held high. The guild also cherished the hope for a better world where everyone, regardless of their differences, could coexist in peace and understanding. But times have changed. Those with special abilities are no longer discriminated against and oppressed. And the leader of your organization joined forces with the guild. Speaking of which, the memory of that great figure returns to my mind. It was a fateful moment when I met CO Hanan, his dragon eyes blazing with resentment and boundless hatred, filled with contempt. "I will never forgive you, Black Dragon. Du Rayon, I despise the humans you cherish." The memory suddenly vanished. Kai slowly raised his hand, looking towards SDO, and said, "Du Rayon is the Black Dragon who," resolutely refusing to abandon humanity, even in her final moments. She chose to remain in the mortal realm. She pointed directly at him, delivering her judgment with unwavering certainty. "Stio, I believe you possess its bloodline." She furrowed her brow slightly, drawing upon her profound knowledge to affirm her claim. "Because only a dragon possesses the ability to kill or wound another dragon. He was on the verge of death. I can only deduce that. Suanan survived after destroying Du Arian." Then she recalled the moment she arrived at the dragon's location. The colossal creature had said, "After the terrifying roars subsided, I returned to search, and upon seeing that the ground bore no trace of a struggle, she was filled with agonizing grief. But Suanan had vanished without a trace." She gradually regained her composure, pondering a question in her heart. "I'm certain he's plotting something, so I've journeyed across the world to find him." We finally tracked him to a remote, desolate land in the eastern part of the continent, a place thousands of miles from the Empire. Kai bowed her head slightly, a serious expression on her face, thinking to herself, although he has lost the absolute power he once wielded, the fact that Sahanan usurped the position of Pope and openly opposed the selfish society proves he's begun to carry out his plan to destroy the world he hates with every fiber of his being. "It was at that critical moment that I met you." Stio, who had been silent until now, listened intently to every word she said. "I feared you would follow in Wang Ryong's footsteps, consumed by hatred for humanity, so I wanted to keep you by my side." Suddenly, he spoke her name, interrupting Kai's train of thought. He then posed a difficult question to her. "Is it a cardinal sin to simply harbor hatred? Have you ever tried to put yourself in Sahanan's shoes to understand him?" Hearing him say that, Kai was taken aback. Sahanan's position? She immediately shook her head vehemently. "Impossible. I don't possess the ability to read minds like you do. How could I possibly understand him?" SDO firmly refuted the previous statement. "You can still try to speculate." Immediately after, he offered a hypothesis. "Perhaps Sue. Was Hanan the first to sense hostility from her? I also don't like those who harbor resentment towards me." Hearing his words, Kai lowered his head, resting his chin on his hand, lost in thought. But the rage and authority of Su Hanan cannot be underestimated. After a moment of thought, she stood up, preparing to leave. "It's late. Everyone should get some rest." SDO quickly stepped aside, expressing his gratitude. Thank you for sharing this story with me without holding back. Seeing his gratitude, she looked surprised. Aren't you angry? He calmly reiterated his previous words in response. Let me repeat myself. Just because you haven't said it, it's not like I was completely unaware. Hearing this, Kai agreed. That's not wrong. Not wanting to linger, she pulled up her hood and walked towards the door. Goodbye, good night. The next morning, a booming voice echoed throughout the boarding house. Sorry to disturb you. Inside Seato's room, he and the others watched intently as someone approached. The Hyper One asked anxiously, Pinocchio, are you able to walk all right now? He turned around, gave a thumbs up, and grinned. I'm completely fine. Let's go. Suddenly, the door burst open. From outside, a group of village kids rushed in, greeting them excitedly. Hi, Selfish Society. Seeing the children, Sushio's group, all had huge question marks above their heads. Just then, Pinocchio watched the children run past him, grumbling, Hey, you kids bursting in like that is going to cause trouble. Seeing the children paying him no mind, he quickly spoke up. If you want to see the leader, you need to show some respect and speak properly. Line up in an orderly fashion. As soon as he finished speaking, the children immediately straightened up, forming a neat line in front of Stio. He looked at the children before him and asked, What can I do for you all? The children all nodded their heads vigorously in response. We've been here since before the sun even rose. Please grant Rian's request. He looked at the children with a sigh, patiently explaining once more. I explained the procedure very clearly yesterday. If you have a request, you need to submit an application at the nearest branch. Suddenly, the freckled boy spoke up, his face filled with worry. But we can't leave the forest. Just then, the boy who had been standing outside the door stepped in and respectfully said, Sir, the red-haired boy seems to be the leader of this group. The red-haired boy stepped forward and tentatively asked, Are you refusing us because you've already accepted another mission? The boy frowned slightly, pleading earnestly. So after you finish that mission, could you help us? Hearing the boy's plea, the other children's faces lit up with hope. Yeah, you could help us after you're done with that. Please, the freckled boy pleaded, tears welling up in his eyes. If you leave, we don't know when we'll see anyone from the guild again. Caught in a dilemma, Stio looked at Kai pleadingly, but she seemed to want to help the children just as much as he did. A gentle smile graced her face, shining as brightly as the stars. He felt awkward and flustered, and turned away. But then he caught the pleading gaze of the boy, the leader of the village children. Suddenly, a memory from his past surfaced. A large bear being carried on the shoulders of a burly man, a durian fruit dangling from his other hand. The man carrying the bear had a proud look on his face, boasting of his accomplishment to the admiring young boy. Look what we caught. Young Rian excitedly shared his dream. I'm going to be the best ranger in the village. Just like you, Dad. His father smiled, beaming with pride. That's my boy. Become an outstanding ranger, so we can be proud and brag to your mother in heaven. Back in the present, Stio knelt before Rian, speaking softly. I heard that. Yesterday you said you didn't need the guild's help. So, what do you want me to do this time? At Stio's question, young Rian hesitated. Tears welled up in his eyes. Unable to hold back his emotions, Rian squeezed his eyes shut. Damn it. He clenched his fists, summoning his courage. I want to leave this forest and find my father. But if I leave, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Rian mustered all his courage, summoning every ounce of strength, and voiced his request. Please find my father in the capital. Please find him and tell me how he's doing. Even just a little bit. Please. As soon as he finished speaking, the boy burst into tears in the middle of the room. Witnessing this scene, Stio felt a pang of guilt and said, I'm sorry, but I can't fulfill your request. Hearing this, Rian immediately whipped his head around, utterly disappointed. I knew it. You wouldn't help me. But before the boy could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. On the contrary, I will personally look into your father's whereabouts. Hearing the next question, the boy turned his head back. What is your father's name, Rian? The boy stopped crying, put his hand on Stio's shoulder, and replied, It's Isaac. Receiving the answer, Stio stood up and said, I understand. After I complete this task, I'll return on this path. Wait patiently for me. The boy suddenly remembered something and spoke hesitantly. So, how much is the reward? The young man, without hesitation, immediately refused the boy's offer. This isn't a job, so there's no need for payment. But promise me one thing. that you will stay here and not leave this forest. Overjoyed, the boy quickly replied with certainty, I promise. I definitely promise. Thank you. Saying this, the young man turned towards the door, satisfied. Wait, the boy suddenly called out. But hearing the boy's question, the young man paused for a moment. What is your name? The young man immediately turned back, smiled gently, and replied, Style. The scene abruptly shifted from the inn to a dense, lush forest. Under the vast, endless blue sky, the buzzing of insects echoed amidst the bright sunlight, creating a vibrant symphony of nature. Just then, a joyful shout shattered the tranquil atmosphere of the forest. The weather's beautiful today. Everyone seems to be enjoying it, but Uhuru isn't happy at all. He complains about the unbearable heat. Parker holds Uhuru in his arms, sympathizing with him. This summer, every morning I'm woken up by the scorching heat. Uhuru sighs wearily. I just wish winter would come quickly. Parker nods in agreement. I prefer winter to summer too. Suddenly, Parker realizes something and exclaims, You're from the desert, aren't you? Shouldn't you like hot weather, Uhuru? Uhuru retorts, Wulida. Then shouldn't you like eating bugs? Since you're a bird? Stung by Uhuru's sarcasm, Parker angrily replies, I'm not a bird. I'm a winged creature, and I absolutely hate bugs. Hearing Parker's answer, Uhuru replied, I'm not a big fan of summer either. It's just that I was born in the desert. You're really prejudiced against me. Hearing their heated debate, Kai approached Estio and whispered, They don't seem to get along very well, do they? He calmly reassured her. It's okay. Uhuru doesn't hate Parker. If he truly hated Parker, it would be much more obvious. But Estio still seemed unconvinced. She looked at the two bickering men and replied, But he seems pretty aggressive right now. Kai seemed unfazed and said casually, Well, that's just how he talks. Estio, who understood both Uhuru and Parker well, offered his own perspective. If he were facing someone he truly disliked, it wouldn't just be like this. With that, he smiled gently and turned to leave. Witnessing Estio's actions, Kai was lost in thought. I'm sure I wasn't mistaken when I left the tavern. In that moment, a gentle smile graced his lips. This small gesture made her even more certain, affirming in a confident tone. Yes, he's completely different from Suanna, she thought to herself, who only knows how to live in hatred and rage. After a moment's reflection, she decided to strike up a conversation with him. Istio, she began, before we leave Vanview. Kai inquired, his face filled with curiosity. Can I ask you something? Why did you agree to those children's requests? He replied casually, I never agreed to any requests. Hearing this, she quickly corrected her question. It wasn't an official mission from the guild. It was more like a promise. She followed him, slowly revealing. I just happened to overhear them saying that. Just a little bit. Instead of voicing her thoughts, she silently mused to herself, dragons always keep their promises. It seems he doesn't truly understand yet, she pondered, how important a vow is to a dragon. Ciodo didn't seem to care about the sincere explanation, casually replying, We're on our way to the capital, and because this isn't too complicated, I agreed to it now. Suki suddenly appeared, exclaiming, You're not heartless. Just then, he remembered the image of the crying boy in the village. I promised that boy I would personally investigate what happened to Rion's father. This won't involve anyone else. You guys don't need to worry. He suddenly remembered something and turned back to ask, Does acting alone like this go against the guild's rules? Kai shook his head slightly. No, it doesn't. Immediately after, Parker, seemingly finished arguing with Uhuru, spoke up. Captain, as long as we don't break the rules, the Guardian requested. Feel free to act as you see fit. He flashed a bright smile, reassuring Stio. Actually, the captain's support team has arrived, so you're free to do whatever you want. Slightly surprised, Stio probed further. Even personal matters? He laughed heartily, replying generously. Of course. Becker hummed a cheerful tune, approaching Stio and explaining. It's all considered work. Every guild member gets paid, based on the missions they complete. His eyes lit up, revealing his ambition. I'm going to work really hard, because this year I want to get a blue Pegasus. Hearing this name for the first time, Stio asked cluelessly, What's a blue Pegasus? Hearing Stio's naive question, he put on a knowing expression, explaining. Simply put, it's a winged horse. These Pegasi are incredibly fast and powerful, but their minds are only focused on glittering gems, so managing them is quite difficult. Parker puffed out his chest proudly, boasting, "In my homeland, many avians dream of riding on the backs of Pegasi and unicorns." Hearing this, Stivo looked at Parker's arms and wondered, "Don't you already have wings?" Parker raised his hand, mimicking Uhuru, and gave an example. "Well, humans have legs, but they still use carriages. It's the same for us." With that, he embraced Uhuru and flew forward joyfully. "If I had to choose, I'd rather have a Pegasus than a unicorn." Looking at Parker, he uttered a puzzling question. Is there really that much of a difference between them? Just then, Parker began to envision these mythical creatures. Although both are mythical creatures, unicorns are usually female, and instead of wings, they possess a magical horn with the ability to heal wounds, while Pegasi are male and have incredibly large, powerful wings. The young man was lost in his daydream, painting a magnificent scene in his mind. How amazing it would be to adorn that azure plumage with gleaming silver armor. If I had a Pegasus, I'd show the captain first. Seeing him so excited, Stio replied with a hint of helplessness. "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it." Soon after, the two ended their conversation and continued their journey. Parker eagerly led the group instead of, like earlier, skipping and jumping energetically. The forest seemed to return to its inherent tranquility. Under the scorching, sweltering summer sun, only the chirping of insects remained. After a while, Parker stopped in front of a protruding rock. He shielded his eyes from the sun, observed ahead, and suddenly noticed something. Parker excitedly pointed forward and shouted, "Captain, look!" Against the clear blue sky, a flock of pristine white birds were soaring, free as the wind. Beneath the earth, a magnificent castle, grand and imposing, gradually came into view. The young man, awestruck by the breathtaking sight before him, exclaimed, "We've finally arrived at the capital city of Eli." He excitedly observed the massive fortress ahead, his face brimming with enthusiasm. That magnificent castle in the distance is the renowned Zubrajan Palace. Just then, an overwhelming sound echoed. Niza gasped, his face filled with anticipation and excitement. "It's magnificent. It's more like a masterpiece than a city." Hearing this, Uhuru looked surprised and curious. "Do you know what a masterpiece is?" Nizu nodded slightly, showing his understanding. "Of course, it's something that holds exquisite beauty. I feel like it's truly beautiful." Suddenly, Nizu became hesitant, stammering, "Excuse me, but may I go there?" Uhuru, seeing Nizu like this, was puzzled. "Is there a problem?" Nizu clasped his hands together, rubbing them nervously. "Well, for others it might be." A sense of guilt of being closed off suddenly consumed Nizu, just like the prophecy foretold. It cried out in despair. "Nizu is so filthy." The small white monkey was drowning in guilt. At least, to everyone else, Nizu is incredibly dirty. Hearing these words, Suteo fell into a thoughtful silence. Nizu continued to pour out his insecurities about his appearance. "I'm really big, and I have so much fur." Just then, he stepped forward, gently interrupting Nizu. "Did what Biryong said bother you?" Hearing him ask, Nizu looked up, eyes brimming with tears, lips pressed tightly together, hesitant to speak. Finally, it lowered its head and answered honestly. "To be honest, yes." Nizu recalled the moment of being criticized and scorned. Another filthy one. Monsters, just vermin that need to be exterminated. Biryong roared in fury. From the very beginning, it was a huge mistake to assume those creatures were allies from the start. After she finished speaking, both Estio and Nizu fell silent, their gazes fixed on the girl. Nizu's heart was filled with confusion and anxiety. What she said was completely true. Most humans hated creatures like himself. Could he continue to stay by Estio's side? He truly wanted to protect him. But if he did, would it put Estio in even more danger? Snapping back to reality, Estio clenched his fists and said apologetically, "I'm sorry for making you listen to something like that, Nizu." Hearing him say that, Nizu was startled and quickly replied, No, it's not like that. I don't feel bad." Nizu cautiously confessed his worries. "I'm just worried. I'm really worried that people will attack." Estio again, "Just because of me." Standing on a mountaintop, Nizu and the others looked down below. "The capital city will definitely have more people than other cities, right? If that's the case, I won't go inside. I'll just wait outside." Estio quickly intervened. "There's no need to do that." Hearing those words, Nizu turned his gaze towards him. But Estio simply placed a comforting hand on Nizu's shoulder. "It's not your fault." Nizu placed his hand on top of Estio's, responding with understanding. "I know, but I don't like them saying such hurtful things." Seeing Nizu refuse his comfort, SDO's expression hardened. He spoke sternly to Nizu. I'll be very angry if I hear anything like that ever again. He then turned his head forward, declaring resolutely, and like I said, you're not bad, just different. As the sun began to set, SDO's words held a firm conviction, dispelling any doubts in Nizu's heart. I'll face everything with you. Don't avoid their gaze. Nizu looked up at SDO, smiled, and gave a small nod of agreement. Ahuru quickly chimed in, offering reassurance. If anyone dares to say anything, I'll show them what for. Empowered by his friends, Nizu cheerfully expressed his gratitude. Thank you, everyone. The scene slowly shifts, drawing closer to the villagers diligently transporting, pulling heavy loads below. Next, the image transitions to two men chatting animatedly, delightfully watching a small bird. And then the lens focuses on Seokyo's group following the villagers entering the inner city. The sky gradually turns orange. The sunset painting the majestic city walls of vibrant red. At the foot of the city gate, a guard is questioning, inquiring about the group's origins. Where do you come from? We come from the Znai's guild. The guard is still requesting further documentation when Parker suddenly notices Ahura acting strangely. Please show me your identification papers. Ahura seems to sense something unsettling, slightly shaking the tree trunk. After being allowed to pass, the group begins to proceed into the magnificent capital. Suddenly, Ahuru exclaimed in amazement, "Wow, it smells so good here." The boy's words immediately caught Styo's attention. Do you smell something? Ahuru looked towards the faint lights ahead, a puzzled expression on his face at Styo's question. Don't you feel it, Styo? Looking at the bewildered eyes directed at him, Ahuru declared confidently, "This is definitely the scent of divine power." Hearing that, Kai seemed to realize something and spoke up. Oh, right. I remember. The capital has a gate that connects directly to the holy temple. Witnessing Ahuru's special ability, Parker was incredibly proud, lifting the boy up and praising him. Goodness, Ahuru, can you sense divine power? Praised. Ahuru excitedly replied, I don't know. Ignoring the boy's answer, Parker continued to marvel. Your sense of smell is that sensitive to divine power? That's amazing. Ahuru looked at him, nodding in agreement. Quite possibly. Suddenly, he adopted a scholarly air, beginning to expound. Naturally, divine energy can only be sensed by priests chosen by the gods. I myself have heard it said that herbs often flourish in sacred lands, and they wither and die in unclean, evil places. This is the basis for the theory that plants were the first living things to perceive the existence of divine power. Ahuru gave him an exasperated look, then countered. That's just a theory, and it was debunked long ago.